Friends, I heartily welcome you all to this knowledge capsule on GST once again. In this session, we will try to learn something about the charging section, types of levy, and something about interstate supply and intrastate supply. To begin with, let's try to learn what is the charging section in GST. Article 265 of the Indian Constitution mandates that no tax shall be levied and collected except by the authority of law. Therefore, every taxing statute must have a charging section, and such a charging section must be unambiguously or precisely defined about the levy and the imposition of tax. The Honorable Supreme Court, in the case of Govind Saran and Ganga Saran versus Commissioner of Sales Tax, laid down four pillars of taxation. They are: the first one is the taxable event. Secondly, the person on whom the tax is imposed. Thirdly, the rate of tax. Lastly, the measure. Now let's try to understand the charging section in GST, which is Section 9, Subsection 1 of Central Goods and Services Tax Act, as well as Section 5, Subsection 1 of Integrated Goods and Services Tax Act. I will not reproduce the provisions of the section. However, I will give you the bisected or the vivisected version of the provisions. Let's try to test the charging section vis-a-vis the law laid down in the Govind Saran and Ganga Saran's case by the Honorable Supreme Court. When we compare vis-a-vis the principle laid down in the case, the taxable event in case of GST is supply of goods, services, or both. Person on whom the levy is imposed is the taxable person. The term taxable person is also defined in GST. Taxable person means the person who is registered under the Act or who is liable to be registered under the Act. When I say who is liable to be registered, liability for obtaining registration under GST arises when a dealer's turnover crosses the threshold limit, 20 lakhs or 40 lakhs as the case may be, or if he falls under the mandatory prescriptions of Section 24 of Central Goods and Services Tax Act. Rate of tax. The rate of tax is also provided in Section 9, Subsection 1, which says rates as may be prescribed. Lastly, the measure. As per the charging section, the value as determined under Section 15 will be the value on which tax is payable. To summarize the charging section, taxable event in GST is, or the subject matter of levy is, supply of goods, services, or both. The person who is required to pay tax on supply will be the taxable person. Thirdly, the rate of tax will be notified by the council. Lastly, the value on which the tax is payable is the value as determined under Section 15, which is known as value of supply. Previously, during our discussion on the constitutional aspects, we understood that Article 246 1A provides concurrent powers to both center and the state to levy GST on supplies made within the state. So that's why we have acts like Central Goods and Services Tax Act and respective State Goods and Services Tax Act, or the Union Territory Goods and Services Tax Act as the case may be. So in case of intrastate supply, we have two types of levies. One is the CGST and SGST, or CGST and UTGST as the case may be. Article 246 subclause 2 says that Parliament shall have exclusive powers to levy GST on supply of goods, services, or both, which takes place in the course of interstate trade or commerce. So, center has exclusive jurisdiction to levy GST on interstate supply transactions. So we have this act called Integrated Goods and Services Tax Act. So we have three different types of levy. One is IGST, CGST, respective state SGST, or UTGST as the case may be. Let's try to understand when IGST is levied on a supply transaction, when CGST and SGST is levied on a supply transaction. IGST is leviable on interstate supplies. There is a cap fixed on the rate of tax which is leviable on interstate supplies by the charging section. The charging section means section 5 subsection 1 of the IGST Act. The maximum rate which can be levied on an interstate supply transaction is not exceeding 40%. CGST and SGST, or CGST and UTGST, is levied on intrastate supply of goods, services. The rate of tax is capped at 20% for CGST, 20% for SGST, or the UTGST as the case may be. Therefore, the maximum rate of tax in GST can be 40%, which is prescribed by the charging section, which is 9 subsection 1 of the CGST Act, similar in the case of state GST or UTGST Acts. Now, the question might arise in our minds, what is an interstate supply? What is an intrastate supply? Before we get into understanding of interstate vis-a-vis intrastate, we should all remember GST is a destination-based consumption tax. When I say destination-based consumption tax, the revenue from collection of GST will go to the states where the goods and services are actually consumed. So, the tax or the GST will chase the goods and chase the services and reside in the state where the goods and services are actually consumed. So, this concept of identifying where the actual consumption of goods or services are happening in GST is known as place of supply. There is also another concept called location of supplier. To put it in very simple terms, location of supplier is the principal place of business of the registered person or warehouse or the godown in case of goods, registered place of business in case of services. To put it in very plain terms without adding complexities to this at this point in time. Now let's try to understand with this background how to determine what is an interstate supply and what to levy. When location of supplier and place of supply are in different states, then it's a case of interstate supply transaction. The tax which should be levied will be IGST. Let's take an example. A supplier based in Karnataka supplying fruit juices of Parle or Pepsi or Coke as the case may be, sells these packed fruit juices to a customer based in Maharashtra. In this case, the location of supplier is in Karnataka. The place where the goods and services are actually being consumed or the place of recipient is Maharashtra. Location of supplier is Karnataka. Place of supply is Maharashtra, which are in two different states. So the tax which should be levied and collected shall be IGST, and it's a case of interstate supply. Now let's try to understand what is intrastate supply. When the location of supplier and place of supply are in the same state, the tax which shall be levied and collected shall be CGST plus SGST. If it's in a union territory, CGST plus UTGST. So this is a classic case of intrastate supply. Let's take an example to understand it better. The company which is based in Karnataka, in Bangalore to be precise, selling packaged fruit juices to a customer based in Belgaum. Supplier is in Bangalore, or the buyer or the recipient is in Belgaum. So the location of supplier is Bangalore, Karnataka. The place of supply in this case is Belgaum, which is also Karnataka, which is in the same state. So the tax which shall be levied will be CGST plus Karnataka GST in this transactions. So this is called an interstate supply. So in this a brief session, what we have tried to understand is the charging section. So which defines what is levy or the imposition of tax in GST, types of levies. We have understood when to levy and collect IGST, when to levy and collect CGST plus SGST or CGST plus UTGST, what is an intrastate supply and what is an interstate supply. I hope I have added some value to your existing knowledge on GST. Thank you. Bye-bye. We will see you next time on another important aspect in my GST knowledge capsule. Thank you.